Thanks, Maeve, for inviting me to speak today. I'm becoming a small bit more comfortable with doing virtual speaking. I do a lot of presenting, and um, I more prefer to be in the presence of people. So, but I think when you're going through discomfort, you grow. So I'm growing slowly through all of this virtual speaking and webinars. So would you like me to fully start presenting now?
Yeah, sure. We've 24 people in. I'm sure there'll be people continuing to join, but I'll monitor that and allow them in when they get there. So yeah, please go ahead.
Okay, so well, thanks everybody for having me here today. And some of you may know me as Sinead as a lawyer, and some of you may know me as Sinead the runner. Um, and some of you may know me as Sinead the Alliance girl because of the Alliance TV advert. I suppose for me, disability has been a very big part of my life, given that I was born with a disability. And a lot of people might think, oh, well, why does disability apply to me? Or why do I need to know about disability? Well, anybody can have an accident or illness, so you can acquire disability. And as well as that, in the last census in 2016, it said that 13.6% of the population in Ireland had a disability. And if you take nothing away from my talk as well today, there's 55,000 people in Ireland who are blind or visually impaired. About 70 to 80% of those people, 70 to 80% of those people, their blindness is more acquired and it's more preventable. Whereas, as I say, mine is since birth. I've been fighting for disability issues for a very long time. Even in 2012, I approached the Law Society and I asked them to put together an event to discuss law and disability issues. And at the time, I was told that they couldn't put that event together because there was no funding there. And the type of personality I am, I decided, okay, well, if they can't put it together, I'll approach the Bar Council of Ireland. So again, I was told that they didn't have any funding. So then I decided, okay, well, what am I going to do now? Because I'm passionate about wanting to speak about disability and creating more visibility of people with disabilities in the legal profession. So I approached the International Bar Association, and that particular year in 2012, they were hosting their conference in Dublin. So I organised and I put together a panel speaking about employment issues and disability issues, and that went ahead. Now, that took a lot of hard work on my part, getting speakers and organising all of that. And I had organised a judge who was totally blind to come over to speak on that panel. Unfortunately, then he was dealing with a circuit court or a criminal case at the time, and he said that he couldn't attend. So I said to myself, okay, well, what am I going to do now? Because I need somebody else on the panel, and if this judge can't attend. So I put myself forward and I went on to the panel. So I ended up being on this panel with Sherry Blair and other lawyers from around the world, and we were talking all about disability issues. And for the majority of the day, I remained quiet and I just listened to other people's views about disability, even though I was the only person on the panel who had the disability, but I was not doing much talking. And the day was coming towards the end, and this Spanish lawyer stood up, and I had posed a question: should we have a quota in the private sector like the public sector, where the public sector has to hire 3% of people with disabilities? So I posed a question: should we have that mandatory in the private sector as well? Should in terms of hiring people with disabilities? And this Spanish lawyer stood up and he said, oh, well, I feel that all people with disabilities, they don't do a good job, they don't turn up on time, and So obviously he had a bad experience in Spain with a person with a disability, but I didn't want the event to end like that, because I had put in 6 to 8 months hard work in getting this event to go ahead, and I didn't want it to end on that type of a note. So I stood up at that point, then I stood up and I used my voice and I said, okay, well, that's your experience of a person with a disability, but I have worked all throughout my college to get to where I am, and I just wanted the conference to end on a note that people with disabilities, that they do hard work, and that not everybody is the same. And I suppose that's when you put in that amount of hard work, you don't want the event to end on a negative note. So it ended on a positive note. So that's just one aspect of disability advocacy that I've been doing. And I seem to be more doing advocacy in my own personal life rather than actually acting as a lawyer, because that event was back in 2012. And then even before that, when I was 17, I had to take a high court case because the Department of Education and my school weren't being completely helpful in getting me educational rights in terms of large print exam papers, etc. So again, acting as an advocate there last October was a very, very low period in my life. A very, very low period in my life, that's what I'll say. And that was all because of having to bring an international sporting organisation to the courts. It was found in a court in Monaco that the IAU, International Association of Ultra Running, had breached Article 14 of the European Convention of Human Rights. And I've learned more about sports law and competition rules and IAAF rules through actually being my own personal advocate than actually being a practicing or a qualified lawyer. And I suppose you have to what I've learned from those situations is you have to learn how to know when to use your platform to get your message across. And yeah, that case did bring me to a low point because I had spent so much time preparing, and it doesn't just affect me, it affects any person with a disability who achieves the level to get into able-bodied sport, because that's what it all revolved around. What had happened was this was the first time a person who had a disability was able to get into a world championship of able-bodied 24-hour ultra running. So anybody who might have thought there that they heard wrong there, yes, 24-hour ultra running. That's another story in itself. Running around for 24 hours, that does cause a lot of suffering and it does cause a lot of pain. And half the time I'm asking myself, okay, why am I putting myself through this? And in those moments I say to myself, well, stop complaining, Sinead. You get to do this. You get to do this. And so that all comes back to about gratitude. And also I kind of say to myself, if women are able to go through the pain of birth, I'm definitely able to do a 24-hour race. But as I say, with that case, it wasn't only just affecting me, it was affecting other people with disabilities if they ever reached that level. And that's what steered me on to keep fighting. And sometimes it can be hard. It can be hard continuously being the role model and continuously trying to make way for others coming behind me, because some of the time you just want to just get into the race and you just don't want any publicity around it. And for me, it kind of actually had all been spoiled, because I was hoping that when Athletics Ireland would publish the female list of participants to go in that would be selected on the Irish ultra running team, that my name would be there along with other girls' names that there be no asterisks beside my name or anything like that, because I had achieved the qualifying standard. And I was visualizing that, and I suppose my name wasn't on that list solely because of my disability. And that was last October in the year 2019. Like, for me, that's very difficult, because I thought that we've come a long way, but obviously we haven't come a long way when that type of discrimination still exists. Even to give you another example, back in January, I was teaching on a course lecturing on disability law and policy, and on that course there was students there, and I was lecturing to them about disability law, and those students were adult students, and they were telling me about, in their practical settings, they very much deal with people with intellectual disabilities, and in those settings they were talking about how they find it hard to practically implement the whole scenario around intellectual disability people who want to have consensual sexual relations. And so they were talking about that in January of this year, in 2020. And I remember when I was working at the Law Reform Commission in 2010, that I was actually working on that scoping paper of the law surrounding the Criminal Justice Act, where it stated that for two intellectually impaired adults to have consensual relations outside of marriage, that it was against the law. So I suppose, even though that law now is changed in 2020, from listening to people in the actual service centres, they're saying that they're finding it difficult to practically implement it, and some of the service centres, they don't actually want to implement it. And just some of those types of stories is just difficult to listen to, because you think, okay, you've made strides, but when you actually listen to people on the ground working with these people, you realise then, okay, well, maybe you haven't made as many strides as what you think. And as I say, I am passionate about diversity and inclusion, and even though I'm not practicing as a lawyer at the moment, I do try and read daily a law article or law a journal article from any journal regarding law. And I came across an article from the International Law Journal in 2020, and it discusses women in law firms and how is women climbing up the ladder. And it was saying that yes, diversity is improving, but overall that there wasn't significant changes. And so again, when you read that, you kind of think to yourself, oh God, well, what's the point in trying to do all this? But you have to reframe your mindset. That article actually is quite interesting, because they talk about there has to be structural changes, systematic monitoring. It also talks about the climate culture, and that you have to change the criteria for success. They talk about the demand on women to be bringing in billable hours of pay, etc. So that article is quite interesting if you're interested in that area of women climbing up the ladder for partner positions, etc. So I can send that on to Maeve later. I also think the other cases that I think are interesting is the nano case of that woman who, the Supreme Court case of that woman who was a special needs assistant and then went on holiday and ended up having an accident and ended up paralyzed. And then when she tried to return to her workplace, that they didn't really want to basically have her back. And again, it reinforces my message that I started talking about at the beginning here, that anybody can acquire a disability, and that woman is a perfect example of it. And then another case that I'm interested in, because again, I was having issues when I was in Leaving Cert back in 2001, that another case would be the Cahill versus the Minister for Education case. And the reason why I think that's an interesting case is because it comes down to the whole thing of disclosure and disability at interviews with employers. And in that case, that girl had dyslexia, and there was an annotation marked on her Leaving Cert paper that she had special arrangements made in exams, and she felt that that was going to discriminate her in when future employers would look at her Leaving Cert, that she felt that that would discriminate against her, and she took the case and Supreme Court ruled in her favour. So again, you kind of say to yourself, how come all these kind of issues are still happening, and how's all this discrimination keep happening? And I suppose discrimination is going to keep happening, and you just have to have the mindset and the want and the desire there to continue to pick your battles, what battles to fight, because you can't fight all battles, and you just have to really, in those low moments, ask yourself, why am I doing this? Because like, you can have your surface level reason why, but then when you dig a lot deeper, you can have, that's where, when you dig a lot deeper than that, that's where you will find your main reasons why you do things. So I just kind of wanted to begin this first part of the seminar or webinar by explaining like about me and the areas of law that I'm interested in. I'm interested in employment law, discrimination law, criminal law. I write for the Irish Criminal Law Journal for the last 10 years, and how I got to write for the Irish Criminal Law Journal was, as I said, back in 2010 when I qualified as a solicitor in 2009, and then the recession had hit, and I was with the Legal Aid Board, and I really enjoyed my job there. But because the public embargo came in, I was let go, because anybody on a temporary contract couldn't have their contract renewed because of the public embargo. I was let go from there, so I was trying to find another job. And I suppose when you have a disability, there's always this thing inside you. Okay, well, do I disclose on the application letter? Do I disclose in the interview? What do I do? And I have experienced indirect discrimination in the past, and some people might find that hard to believe, but it has happened. I have been at social events where I have been told that, yes, come in, there's a job there, and then suddenly when you actually arrive with your black shaded sunglasses and your white cane, suddenly the job is gone. And so again, that is difficult to deal with. Back in 2010, when I was trying to find a job, and like so many others, I applied to the Law Reform Commission. They said that they'd give me a voluntary contract, and I was to be working on the scoping paper for, as I said, the intellectually impaired and the sexually relations. And that was for a 6-month contract, but the only thing was that they weren't going to be paying me, and that I was living in Cork at the time, and that was up in Dublin. So I viewed the LRC as a very prestigious place to work, and I said to myself, okay, well, if I can go in there, show my passion and desire, then that will actually make it easier for me to get a job as a solicitor. So I had to say to myself, how badly do I want my goals? Because how was I going to live in Dublin if I didn't have any wages coming in? So this is how badly I wanted my goals. I got up every morning at 4 a.m, got the 5 a.m. train to Dublin, got to Dublin at 8 a.m, got a bus out to Ballsbridge, started work in the LRC at 9 a.m, got a train back to finish at the LRC at 5:30, got a train back to Cork at 7 o'clock, got back to Cork at 10 o'clock, got a taxi home, and then was home by 10:30, 11 o'clock, and back up the following morning at 4 a.m, and not back that night again until 11 o'clock. So I did that Monday to Friday for 6 months, and the reason why I did that is because I really badly wanted a law job practicing as a solicitor, and I felt that that was my route, that was my stepping stone. looking back now on it, I don't know, would I have the energy now to be doing it? It kind of seems a bit mad. But while I was there was a guy and he said to me, oh, I see you have passion for criminal law. And I said, yes, would you like to write an article for the Irish Criminal Law Journal? And I wrote the article thinking it was only going to be one article. And 10 years later, I'm still writing for the Evidence and Procedure Update. And following on from that, I did get a law job in a solicitor's office. And in my head, okay, well, once you got a law job on South Mall in Cork, then you'd made it. But I actually got this law job and I was kind of thinking to myself, okay, is this it? And what I realized from that was I was striving. I kept telling myself, I will be happy when, I'll be happy when I have that law job. And because I had built it up so much in my head, that's why I was kind of disappointed. And like the lesson learned from that is to try and find happiness in every day. Try and find something small, happiness every day, because you don't know if you have tomorrow. And then following on from that, then while I was with that solicitor firm, I stayed there for, I don't know, a few weeks, few months, and then I decided to go off and do a PhD. And I was doing that for about 4 years. And towards the end of that PhD, I ended up getting an honorary PhD. So I kind of said to myself, is there any point finishing out this academic PhD when I already now have a PhD? But I ended up finishing out the academic one. And yeah, so that, like, for me, a lot of people think that doing a PhD is very much an intelligence test. And I don't think it's an intelligence test at all. It really is a character test, because there was so many times during that PhD process that I wanted to give up and I didn't. And so I learned a lot about myself, about my strength, my inner strength. And yeah, so it really does test your character doing a PhD. In terms of how have I managed with the COVID recently, I think that dealing with the COVID has been hard, but for me, the isolation and the social distancing hasn't been as hard as what many other people would be experiencing. And I think the reason why that is, one, because of my disability, and two, because of doing a PhD, because when you have a disability, and a lot of people who have disabilities do experience a lot of isolation and a lot of exclusion, and I have experienced that a lot throughout my life. I have been excluded because of my disability a lot throughout my life, and when you're doing a PhD, you're very much by yourself, working by yourself. So the whole thing of the social distancing, I've kind of managed quite well, but due to my type of personality and my experiences of growing up, I do suffer from anxiety. So at the beginning of the COVID, when they were talking very much about washing your hands because of my anxiety, my type of personality would very much be, okay, they tell you wash your hands 10 times. Well, I'm going to wash my hands 20 times, and I'm going to maybe keep my hands in the basin of water for nearly 20 minutes. So that's my type of personality, and that's just because of just my experiences throughout life. And so, like, obviously you can't spend 20 minutes nearly every single day having your hands in a basin of water. So how do you kind of get over that? Well, what I've learned is through purpose and connection, and structure. So having structure to my day and having purpose to my day and having connection. So they're the things that has helped me get through the COVID. And now I'm kind of at the beginning, I was very anxious, because I suppose all I kept thinking about was, my biggest fear was that losing a family member or losing a loved one to that virus. So that was my biggest fear, and thankfully that hasn't happened. And so that was my biggest fear, and now that that hasn't happened, then I'm kind of a bit more calmer now, and I'm more relaxed. And I've kind of, when you're anxious, you need to try, and when a lot is uncertain, what works what has worked for me is trying to reframe your thoughts and control your thoughts and make your thoughts get disciplined with your thoughts, so, and focus your energies otherwise. So in the last month or two, I've really been focusing on my YouTube channel and learning about voiceovers and learning about technology and learning about scripting and writing and reading books and everything like that. So that's where all my energy has been focused. So that's a lesson learned for me. Hopefully you could maybe apply that in your own life. I think sport has taught me a lot. My achievements in sport has taught me a lot. And a podcast that I would recommend is from my running coach, a podcast called No Finish Line, John O'Regan. So on that, it features athlete interviews, and he has an exercise, he has interviewed an exercise psychologist on it called Dr. Noel Brick. That podcast was extremely interesting to listen to. Other podcasts that I listen to would be maybe by Tim Ferriss, and he talks very much about, say, goal setting and mindset as well. And even his book, Tools of Titans, looking at the tips and tricks of billionaires and how they've got to where they're at. And other things I've been doing, other books are that I've been reading during the COVID crisis has been even books relating to kidnappings. Now that might sound very dark, but I'm kind of very much interested in that psychology type of area. So I would have read the books of Amanda Berry and J.C. Lee Dugard. Those are two girls in America, separate cases where they were both kidnapped, both held for numerous number of years, 20 years or more, and ended up escaping. And I'm very much interested in their mindset, as in how that girl, J.C. Lee Dugard, she was kept in a shed for 20 years, and that mindset, how do you stay in that confined space without going insane? Or even the other girl, Amanda Berry, being confined in a bedroom for numerous amount of years without going insane. So I'm very much interested in that, because I think we can all learn from one another through reading, whether it's reading law journals, whether it's reading people's stories, listening to podcasts, as I suggested. And I'll send you on the two documents, that International Law Journal, and then there's another document that I've recently been reading. The World Bank did a study of women and how we're progressing, women in law and business. And the first thing I did was look, where is Ireland on the list? And Ireland was number 13 on the list, and there was 8 indicators, and Ireland fell down on the point of parenthood. So I found that interesting. I can send you the links for those. But as I keep talking, I haven't really even told you much about my disability, only that I'm visually impaired. So I have 4 eye conditions: aniridia, coloboma, nystagmus, and glaucoma. And aniridia, I take in too much light. Nystagmus is movement of my eyes, involuntary movement of my eyes. Glaucoma is too much pressure, and coloboma is the part missing of my eye. And I suppose, yeah, living with these conditions has been difficult. And a question a lot of people ask me is, oh, what can you see? And I find this extremely difficult to answer to people, because I've never lived in a world to see what you see. So that's why I find it very difficult to compare. And yeah, and how did I find out that I was visually impaired? Well, at the age of 4, I leant in very close to a TV screen because I couldn't see the screen. And even now, as I'm talking to a screen, I can't really see the screen either. I can't see anything on the screen. It's just more blurry. And I leant into this screen, and my nose touched against the TV, and I got a static shock, and I fell backwards, and I started crying. And I said to my parents, why do I have to look at things up so close? And their attitude was very much, you're visually impaired, get on with it. And now obviously it wasn't as harsh and as abrupt as that, but I suppose the life lesson they were trying to teach me quite young was that self-acceptance is the greatest gift in life that you can give yourself. And they were trying to teach me, look, it's always going to be this way. So the sooner you learn about yourself and learn what works best for you, the sooner you can educate others. And that's what my parents were trying to teach me. And I suppose that was working quite well up, and this whole thing about being different, and that's fantastic, and those type of principles that they were trying to teach me, that worked really well until I entered school. And when I entered primary school, then I very, very quickly realized that I was the only person who was using a magnifying glass in class. I very quickly realized I was the only person using a white cane going around. And when you're different, it's that is difficult when you're different. And I suppose the children in my school, they weren't the nicest. So they used to play a game. They'd all put me in a circle and they'd all take a punch at me, and whoever drew blood was the winner of the game. And so obviously you don't want to be going to school to be in that game. So I decided that I wasn't going to go to school anymore. And I felt to myself, okay, well, how can I not go to school? So I stopped eating, and that plan worked out really well because I ended up in hospital. And obviously, you know the ending to that story, because I'm not a ghost. It is actually me talking to the camera. So I did get better from that situation. But how did I get better from that situation? Well, it really came down to the mental, physical, and spiritual energy that was around me. Like my parents and my family and just different professionals, they can all try and help you as best you can, but you have to take the self-responsibility and you have to take the accountability to put into practice what they're trying to teach you. So it comes down to your own desire, it comes down to the energy that you're creating in your life, and just having the support of others, and also comes down to patience. Like, you don't just be sick one day and get better the next day. It's a long process. And I think as well, even with this COVID situation, it's patience of waiting for it to pass. And that is the thing, it will pass, but we just have to wait for it to pass. And so that was a difficult situation in my life when I was around 8. And when I was 17, I told my careers advisor teacher that I want to study law, and very much her attitude was, oh no, you can't study law, that's a reading based subject. And so yeah, the pendulum really swung then for me, because I said to myself, well, I believe in myself, I believe that I can achieve this. And I went on and I studied law, and then in second year in UCC I felt, okay, well actually maybe I can't study law, because I all the time have pains in my back from bending over, I have pains in my wrists from holding my magnifying glass, I'm getting headaches, I have sore eyes. And so I decided that I was going to give up, and I said to my parents I was giving up, and their attitude was, okay, well if you want to give up, that's fine with us. And then that actually kind of annoyed me a bit, because I was like, oh well, do you not care? Like, normally parents would try to convince their children to stay in college, but their attitude was, you're an adult now, you have to take self-responsibility. If this is a mistake, you have to experience the mistake yourself and learn from it. So, but they did say to me, before you definitely do give up, we'll go to London for a shopping trip. I thought I was going to London for a shopping trip, and I did end up going to London, but I didn't go shopping. I ended up meeting a judge who was totally blind, and he became a role model to me. And I came back and I said, well, if he can do it, then I can do it. And that's why I pursued on my law degree then. So I want you to think for a moment about who's a role model in your life. And I want you to ask yourself, why is that person a role model to you? And also, I want you to think about that all of us are role models, whether we realize it or not, through our actions, thoughts, and behaviors. Each day, all of us are role models. And sometimes you don't want to be a role model, but and that can be hard. As I was saying, like my IAU case last October, all I really wanted was just to participate in the race, and I didn't want to have to go through all this hassle of being a role model and breaking down barriers for others and all of that. And so I just like you to think about that for a moment. I won't, like, if we had all been in a big conference room, I'd actually go around and ask people to maybe verbally say out, but I'm not going to do that on this webinar. And as you're thinking about your role models for a moment, I want you to close your eyes. Now, this kind of stupid task, because I can't see if you're closing your eyes or not. But I just want you to close your eyes for a moment and just realize that you have that choice whether to close your eyes or not. Whereas I didn't have that choice when I was born. I didn't choose to be born with a disability. That's it. I just have to accept it. Same with the COVID-19 situation. None of us chose for it to happen, but it has happened. So you have to, like, accept it, or just stay stuck and be feeling sorry for yourself. Like, I could have stayed stuck in a victimhood type of scenario and said to myself, oh, I'm going to have a negative mindset, and just choose to be blind, as in being blind, or choosing to be visionary. And I suppose that's what I've tried to do all throughout my life, is to have a productive, meaningful life, and to show others that people with disabilities who are from diverse backgrounds can achieve. And for me, even doing this webinar this evening, is I would have never imagined that a group of very high prestigious women lawyers in Ireland would actually want to hear me speak. So, like, even coming on this evening, I nearly felt like I was going into an exam, or that I was going into a very serious race, because it means something to me to have people want to hear my voice and want to hear my thoughts and opinions. So I'm extremely grateful to everybody who has joined the webinar this evening. And yeah, so back to what I was just saying a few moments ago about closing your eyes. If you do close your eyes, thank you. And if you haven't, then maybe at some stage later this evening, you might do that little exercise and ask yourself, what would your life be like if you did acquire a disability? And that's why I try and get people to practice gratitude each day. And yes, we all go through tough times, but to try and practice gratitude and see the things that you're grateful for. And there's a lot of things I say that are very basic, but sometimes it's the basic things that we neglect to do. So I each day do try and make it a daily, nearly like brushing my teeth now at this stage, to make sure that I read something that I can learn from, whether through a 6-minute podcast or a 6-minute YouTube video, or speak to people in my life who I know are supporting my goals, or who are a positive influence in my life. So I just want you to think about that. And I also want you to think about kind of with going forward, what are your goals? And a lot of people think about outcome goals. And when I say outcome goal, as in I want to lose weight and I want to get to X number of pounds, or I want to do a marathon and I want to run in X time. So the X time, when you go and you do your marathon, and if you get your X time, then your outcome goal. But more, because of the current situation that we're in, I think it's more what you should do is focus on process goals rather than outcome goals. So process goals would be, okay, I can't go out and do the amount of training I need to do at the moment, but I'm going to focus on process goals, such as I'm going to listen and watch YouTube videos about core strength, or I'm going to read up on journal articles, or though enhancing my skills in other ways. so that you're best preparing yourself for when it does come time to put your goal into action. Like when I was trying to prepare for the World Marathon Challenge, I didn't have sponsorship for. I decided in January 2016 to go on the World Marathon Challenge, and then in June 2016 I had 2 sponsors lined up, and in June 2016 the 2 of them dropped me because Brexit had happened, and they said that they were freezing their CSR. And that summer was really difficult for me to train because I was going out on a Sunday morning with my guide runner onto a track in the lashing rain, and I was just running around this track doing a 4-hour training run. And I was saying to myself, why am I doing this? Like, I'm preparing for a goal that I've no money to go on. Why am I doing it? And the lesson learned that I learned out of that was, it's better to be prepared for an opportunity and not have one than to have an opportunity and not be prepared. So I kept training as if I did have the sponsorship, and I kept clinging on to a piece of hope that the sponsorship would happen. And yeah, so in that October, a sponsor came forward, and they kept telling me that they were going to sponsor me. They were bringing me to meetings, they were having phone calls with me. And December came and they still hadn't given the sponsorship. And I just emailed them and I said, like, look, you just have to give an yes or no answer. You're either giving the money or you're not giving the money. And they emailed back and they said, Dear Susan. And you know, when a person says in an email, Dear Susan, and your name is Sinead, you know that this isn't going to be a good email. And so then they decided not to go ahead with the sponsorship. And I think I was more annoyed with them saying Dear Susan rather than Dear Sinead, as opposed to the part of we're not giving you the sponsorship. But I ended up telling a friend, oh, my dream of going on the World Marathon Challenge is over. And that particular friend went off and told another friend, like everybody in Ireland does. And about 5 friends later, it gets back to this company, Alliance. And this lady in Alliance rings me and says, oh, I hear you want to go on some trip. And I ended up discussing it with her, and was brought up to the Alliance office, and I was basically assessed and asked why I want to go on this trip and all these different questions. And then I was told that their decision before I actually went into the meeting was that they felt that they didn't have the money to sponsor me, but whatever I said in that meeting changed their mind. And again, there's always hope. Like when you're sitting in the darkness, if you can find the light and if you can see the light, then that's a good thing. And I ended up going on the World Marathon Challenge. So what was that? That was running 7 marathons on 7 continents within 7 days, 6 days, 9 hours to be exact. We went to Antarctica. So it was Antarctica, Chile, Miami, Madrid, Marrakesh, Dubai, and Sydney. And a lesson learned from that experience was that on the first day in Antarctica, my feet got really badly blistered. And normally that wouldn't happen like 5K into a race. But in this particular marathon, because of the shoes I was wearing and the wool socks, I got really badly blistered feet 5K into the first race. And then by the Friday, the 5th day, my feet were so badly blistered and so swollen that you actually couldn't even feel my ankle bone. And when I'd be walking, you could hear all the fluid in my feet swishing side to side. So I didn't want to traumatize anybody. So this is why I specifically didn't put any picture of my blistered feet up in that PowerPoint presentation of photos a while ago. But so by the 5th day, my feet were so badly blistered that when I was running along with my guide runner, that if I kicked anything, yes, it was going to hurt. So I ended up kicking, I say it was a rock, he says it was a stone. So obviously there's a difference of opinion, but I ended up kicking this rock, and the pain I was in was just absolutely, I don't think I've ever experienced pain like it. But so he says I kind of overreacted. So you can all judge for yourself if I overreacted or not. What actually happened was I tore off my race belt. I threw my race number on the ground and I said, that's it. I'm not doing any other marathon. That when you and me, this is why I said to my guide runner, when you and me get back to Dublin, never ever again text me, phone me, you didn't do your job properly, etc. So that might be an overreaction, but little did I know, behind my back, he was beckoning over a sports psychologist to come over and talk to me. This sports psychologist came over, was talking to me, was asking me, oh, why did you come on this trip, and trying to figure out my reason why and what's my purpose in life. And I was kind of explaining that a lot of the reason why I do a lot of my running is because it's a platform and it's a springboard for me to go on and do my talks, which then is a springboard for me to talk about issues that I'm passionate about, such as disability. And obviously another reason why I did it was because I got to go around the world, and I also got to get a Guinness World Record for being the first blind person to do the 7 marathons, 7 continents in the shortest period of time, and also being the first Irish female to do the World Marathon Challenge. So the sports psychologist got me back into the race, and I said, well, I can't do it now because I use a lot of colourful language with my guide runner. He's gone now, and what am I going to do? And lo and behold, John, the guide runner, was behind me, and he said, look, Sinead, if you want to continue, I'll continue on with you, because I've been with you since day one. I believed in your goals since day one, and I want to help you complete it out. And what I learned from that situation was that people in our lives who believe in us, our teammates, that you really need to keep those people close and build strong, long-lasting relationships with those people. And I even think it comes back to the Pareto principle of the 80-20% rule, where a lot of the 20% of stuff that we do causes the 80% of impact. We just need to figure out what is that 20% of stuff that we're doing that gives the 80% the impact. And that's why they say that you only have, say, 20% of close friends on your hand, going by this, say, Pareto principle. And John, yeah, did turn out to be a close friend to me, that he wanted me to succeed. So we got back into the race, and that was a really bad day, as I say. The following day in Dubai, when we were doing our 6th marathon, this just shows you that it all comes down to your mindset and realizing that not every day is the same. Because on the 6th day, then I had a really, really good race, and I came joint first in that race. And in that race, when around 21 miles, John said to me, don't get excited, but you're in 2nd place position. And all I heard was 2nd place, and I've never won a marathon in my life. So I said, okay, I'm definitely going to try and win this. So I did get excited, and we were coming near the water station, and this girl was drinking from the water, and John said, okay, let's stop at the water station to see how much water she drinks, because then we can assess whether she's strong or weak, etc. Now I wanted to keep running on, but he wanted to stop, so we ended up stopping this water station. And the girl said to me, she said, oh, we're all finding this race difficult, aren't we? And like, in that kind of scenario, you don't know what to be saying to your competitor, and I haven't figured out how to talk about my competitor with my guide runner when the competitor is standing right in front of you. So I just said, yeah, we're all finding it difficult. So she then said to me, will we run to the finish line together? And again, my attitude was, well, if she's looking weak, I'm off by myself. But if she's looking strong, I will run to the finish line together with her. So we ended up agreeing to run to the finish line together, and we started running, and her shoelace opened and I took off. And my guide runner tipped me on the shoulder and he said, remember your agreement. And then I said to him, remember, you're the guide runner, not the guilty conscience. Now let's go. So, but anyway, he just helped me realize that when you make an agreement with somebody, you have to have that honesty and you have to have that integrity. So even though the instinct competitive person in me wanted to win that race, I held back because I'd made an agreement with this girl, and we ended up running to the finish line together, and it was a first for each of us because my guide runner kind of stood back, and 400 meters from the finish line, he let that girl guide me to the finish line. And so that was a first for her. And it was a first for me for a first for winning a marathon. So on that 6th day, it did show that you can have a bad day and also a good day. And I also did a first when I was out in the World Marathon Challenge. By the first time I was ever camping was in Antarctica, and the last time I was ever camping was in Antarctica. So yeah, I think you have to go through and experience different things in life to learn different things about yourself. And I think I've been talking for a very long time, and as you can see, what I lack in eyesight, I make up for in talking. So I can keep talking, or I can take some questions, or what do you think, Maeve?
Yeah, there are some questions here for you, Sinead. Thanks so much. I can't believe you're able to talk. This is fascinating. Every story is like its own thing, and then wrapped up with like a wonderful nugget for all of us to take on is amazing. But we do have some questions now. In fairness, one of them you may have dealt with already, because people did want to hear more about your running and what you've learned from that. So let me see. So there was a, could Sinead tell us about her running achievements and how the sport translates into life lessons? And then the next one was just wondering if Sinead might like to comment on mental illness as a non-visible disability in the workplace. And there's loads of compliments. I'll skip the compliments to the end because we'd be here all day about how fabulous you are. So I'll just stick with the questions for now.
Okay, well, in terms of how you can translate running into everyday life, what I've learned from running, I've learned about patience, discipline, like hard work, because you have to put in the hard work. And if you're aiming for a specific marathon time, it doesn't just happen. Like at the beginning of this year, I had the intention of training and qualifying in a race in May to then go on and go to, hopefully have been selected to go on and go to the Paralympic marathon. And if I was to be doing that, I would have had to achieve a minimum of between 3:10 and 3:15 in a marathon time. And so my training around January and February was all focused on that. And it was looking like in February that if I continued on my training the way I was, that I was going to be hitting 3:10 for my marathon time to get me selected and or get me eligible for selection. So you have the up days and the down days, and you have to be patient waiting for the results. So I've learned that, and even through that story that I just told there about me and Savannah running to the finish line to get together, you have to learn about sportsmanship. And even I've done 3 12-hour track races now, okay? And in each of these 3 12-hour track races, I've come second female. And coming second, now all these other girls, they're all fully sighted. I'm always the only competitor in the races that has a disability. And in these 3 12-hour track races, coming second female, and second female now is getting quite boring at this stage. Like, I am just really competitive and I want to come first female. And there in 2018, when I did the last 12-hour track race, I went into that race and I just said to myself, I'm not coming out of this race second female. And I suppose I had tried a different strategy in that race compared to the other 2 races. And in that race, the strategy I tried just went, it just ended up being a failure. And I was actually even lucky to come second female in that race. And I was lucky that I didn't end up coming 3rd or 4th female. And so at the end, because I had went into it feeling confident, thinking that I was going to be coming first female. It was very difficult then for me to go over and shake the girl who came first and shake her hand and say well done to her. I did find that difficult, but I did do it. She very much knew going into that race that I was going into that race to win. So I found that difficult to do. So yeah, so that's how I feel how sports translates into areas of your life, being patient, sportsmanship, hardworking, persistent, determined. So they're kind of controlling the controllables, focusing on what you can control as opposed to what you can't, being focused and determined. So they're just some of the things. In terms of the question regarding mental health, yes, that is extremely difficult, and it's very difficult for employers to deal with that. And I suppose it really does come down to encouraging your staff to be open and honest and creating a culture where the staff feel that they can go and talk to their managers and that they won't be judged. And I suppose even for myself, I do talk about, as you heard in my stories there, that I do suffer from anxiety issues, and that if you're told to wash your hands 10 times, I end up washing my hands 20 times, and how at the beginning of this COVID situation that I was extremely anxious. And being a public speaker, I kind of question myself sometimes, okay, well, should I be saying that? Should I be letting myself that vulnerable? Because when I want to go back as a full-time practicing as a solicitor, or even going back part-time practicing as a solicitor, will law firms be open? Will they want to hire me knowing that information? So I suppose there's this feeling within me that there is a small bit of judgment there on the part of not just employers, but just as in society in general, and allowing yourself to be vulnerable. So I think that if employers can create a culture where staff feel that they can go and have the conversation, that will help. But it is quite difficult on employers. There's a fear there as well. How do we handle this? I don't know, does that fully answer that question?
Yeah, I thought that was really good, and you have been so honest today or this evening, you know, about what you found difficult and low points and stuff. So I think you're a great example of being vulnerable, and the benefits then of that for other people to hear. It's not plain sailing, and even people such high achievers have tough times. There's another question here. Just says, you have so much wisdom on personal motivation and drive. How did you develop this attitude, and how could legal educators develop this approach to life?
Well, I think it comes down to what inspires you. And like, I think inspiration can be found from anywhere. So like, inspiration can be found from family, from friends. Inspiration can be found from nature. It can be found from books and podcasts. So where did I get my attitude and drive? I suppose that comes down to then like nurture versus nature. It also comes down to your experiences in life. And I was born into a world of rejection, not connection. And that's the reality. That is the reality of my life. I've had to fight for everything in my life. I've never been handed anything. First day of my law in UCC in 2001, I sat with one girl on my right-hand side, and she had told me how one of her parents was a judge. And on the other side, the other girl, she was telling me how both her parents were barristers. I come from a family where nobody in my family are lawyers. Nobody in my family's legal connection. Our socio-economic means wouldn't be the same as most typical lawyers. So when you come from that situation, and when you're placed into a situation of being among a lot of law students who you kind of feel that have different connections to you and they're different to you, that can be extremely intimidating. So that can be a driving force to work harder. So if your peers, if they're revising 10 times, then you revise 11 times. Why do you do that? Because you have to, because you have to be dealt the cards that you're given. If you're only given 2 cards, you really need to work on those 2 cards. If the other person has 10 cards, great for them, but you need to figure out what you're going to do with your 2 cards to make your 2 cards better than the person who has 10 cards.
Amazing,
so,
yeah.
I hope that answers
Really,
that.
really good. Yeah, I think it's amazing how positive you are and just, you know, practical. And it's kind of the opposite of what we hear about, you know, not, I know self-care is important, but just the kind of, yeah, you're just like, get out there and do it and stop wallowing and, you know.
Well,
Yeah,
I'll even give you an example. There the other day, I was discussing with somebody about how I'm going to buy a new pair of runners. So of course I was doing all my research, and I was looking at a variety of different runners, and I was weighing up the pros and cons of all these runners. And I asked the person for advice, and that person said, oh, well, going by Hicks' law, you've too many choices. And the person was debating with me about, oh, I really should narrow it down to 2 or 3 choices. And then I was trying to explain to this person, well, I don't care about Hicks' law. I don't care. I want choices in my life. I was born into a world of not having choices. So I want as many choices as possible. So yeah, I know now there are completely different scenarios between buying a pair of runners and the choices of that, and Hicks' law, and the choices of being born with a disability. But hopefully you try and see what I mean. And even though you say that I'm extremely positive, and I do have down days, and a lot of people don't see the rejection that I've experienced, the indirect discrimination, or the times even last October when I was going through all that hassle with the IAU, and all the nights when I was on the phone to my solicitor and the barrister, and people surrounding me, and just crying my eyes out, because I was standing up for my rights, but at the same time knowing that I could end up the most hated ultra runner. And that scared me, because the Irish team, the event, the World Championships was on the Saturday. The Irish team, the men's and women's team, were flying out on the Thursday morning. By the Wednesday, the other side, the IAU, still hadn't given a decision whether I was going to be allowed to participate. Now, if they weren't going to give a decision by 5 p.m. on the Wednesday, my legal team were going forward and getting an injunction to stop the World Championship from going ahead. And this is what I mean, that I could have ended up the most hated ultra runner, because every runner in that World Championship is a serious runner. But the people who were in the top 5, they're doing this as a full-time job. Like Camille Herron, the winner, the female winner, she goes out, runs twice a day, every day. It's the World Championship and her times that she achieves in that she brings back to her sponsors at Nike and shows them, and then they sponsor her more. So even though she really sympathized with my case and said that this is an absolute disgrace, I don't think she would have been too impressed had I got that injunction and had that World Championship been cancelled. And that's a very difficult position for me to have been in. So, like, as I say, I'm extremely positive, but there has been a lot of times where I have questioned, oh, why is this happening to me again? And yeah, and in those moments, it is extremely difficult to listen to a motivational podcast, and it's like torture. It's extremely difficult to listen to people around you tell you that you can get through this, and even listen to myself say, okay, well, we all have our own mountain to climb, and when you're in the dark, look for the light, and all of this. And even this year, like at the beginning of the year, I set out my goals, and I just wanted everything to go the way I wanted it to go. So basically I was going to go for the Paralympics, and in that as well. I was going to try and apply to some law firms to get part-time work, and then because that then would all lead on to all my goals that I set out for next year. And now all of this year has basically just fallen apart. So you're left with the decision of the goals that you want to do next year, which is very much completely separate to running. What do you do now? Do you keep training on for those goals, or do you just put your goals for next year aside? So again, mentally, that's very taxing and very draining, trying to come up with those decisions.
Yeah, it's interesting to hear that even at your level, and the goals are so much bigger, but we're all facing that at the moment of having to reprioritize and figure out how everything fits in and not being able to plan. It's really hard. But thank you so much, Sinead, for that amazing talk, amazing story. Can't wait to read your book and get, you know, all the things you didn't even manage to tell us. I want it to be a biography soon.
Well,
and I know
during this period of COVID, I have been finishing up my book, so I'm at the process now of editing down a 75,000 word book that has to get down to 65,000 words. So that's not great. That's not great fun every day trying to do editing, but yeah.
Well, be well worth it. I'll certainly be looking forward to that. And there's loads of compliments and thanks in the chat, so I'll send them on to you after. But on behalf of IWLA and the committee and everybody here, thank you so much for your time. Really, really amazing. And best of luck with everything.
Thanks very much for having me, Maeve. And thanks to everybody for listening. And I just briefly want to say thanks so much to KOD Lines and Leonore Florley, who was my barrister, for helping me with the big case that I had last October, because they just did a superb job for me.
We'll pass that on. Okay, everyone, we'll see you next week. Thanks.
Thank you. Bye.